as Christians, what do you say to a world that is intent upon taking your children and cramming it into their brains that they shouldn't use terms like mommy and daddy, that they shouldn't be looking forward to getting married and having children, that in fact it's irresponsible for them to think about having children? Saw a series of tweets within the past 72 hours of someone saying, I really want to have a child, but I'm just torn because I realize this would be a Western child, and Western children are not sustainable. The natural desire created by God for this woman to have a child, to love that child, to nurture that child, destroyed by the secular mindset that sees no purpose in what God is doing, because there is no God and there is no purpose to begin with. Secularism is dehumanizing. It is dehumanizing. It's destructive to human flourishing. It's destructive to human thought, destructive to human life, destructive to human families. And as I said, it is the greatest enemy that I can imagine that has reared its flag against the name of Jesus. Its destruction is necessary. But it is in and of itself destructive of human life. And so I can't prove this. I just throw this out here. And I want other Christians to think about it. But if it is Christ's intention to crush this enemy under his feet, and the last enemy that must be defeated is death itself, well, this is the culture of death. This is the culture of death. This is the culture that loves abortion. This is the culture that thinks it's cool to experiment on unborn babies. This is a culture that if you would dare to even slightly limit their freedom to end a pregnancy, you are a backwards Neanderthal and they will punish you. This is the culture of death. This is the culture of death that says you shouldn't have children. That you should mutilate healthy young bodies so they can never have children out of confusion and rebellion against God's decree about male and female. What does it look like when that enemy of Christ is crushed? Is it not possible that allowing this system to destroy itself in self-immolation, and that may be a massive, huge event, self-immolation, in such a way that it becomes a watchword for the rest of time? Never again. Never again can we dare to look at mankind as being anything other than the creation of God. Look what'll happen. We'll start experimenting on our genes. We'll start creating freakish stuff because we're stupid and arrogant and rebellious and think we know everything there is to know. Look at what we unleashed on ourselves. Think that might happen? I don't know. I don't know. But we have to be prepared. We have to communicate to our children and to our children's children who they really are in a way that will resonate with them, in a way that they will understand and that will survive the constant. See, folks, when you study church history, when you study history as a whole, you discover that Christians are really good at resisting short, intense persecution. People you would never expect will stand tall and say, I will not deny Christ. The enemy knows this. And so, when you look at North Africa, you're looking at a geographic place that was once 90% Christian. It's now 98% Muslim. And it's not, as you may have been told by some, because the Muslims came in and put a sword to your neck and said, convert or die. Did that happen? Yeah, in some places, but generally, no. Generally, that's not what was done. Instead, you used the slow burn method. You used the daily pressure method. You used the Christians can never rise above being janitors in our society method. You can never have the opportunities we will have. You can never have the power, the societal advancement, the homes, the health. You make Christians pay every single day for being Christians. That's the effective way. That's the long-term methodology. And we have to build foundations. We have to preach and teach and pray that by the Spirit's power, you build a foundation that can stand up to the daily grind, as well as the massive one-time instant challenge as well. You can have certain substances that are extremely hard and can survive the sudden impact of an explosion, for example. But that will come apart over time, will be worn down over time by something as little as a stream flowing over it. Building a foundation can survive both isn't easy. It is not easy. Pastors, my dear brothers, maybe you're like me. I'm going to be very honest here. Be very honest here. That sermon that I preached, that I just talked about in Iron Sharpens Iron, most people look at me only as an apologist, and that is primarily what I do, but I am a pastor. I do love my folks. I want the best for them. And I preach that sermon because I don't want some of them to come to me 5 years from now and they've experienced persecution and we didn't at least try to prepare them, try to give them the tools they would need. I can't walk with every one of them through those fiery trials, just as they can't walk with me. If it comes to us, it's probably going to come to the pastors first. And I don't for a second sit here and go, and I'm going to be just fine. Outside of the grace of God, there's not a one of us that would ever stand. But I feel the pressure when I have opportunity of preaching. It's almost like going back to the old ways and the old days. It's really hard to do. You know, I need to continue my series on baptism. Baptism is an important thing. You can't just stop preaching about fundamental foundational things. But every time I start thinking about it, I also realize there are new pressing issues. The vast majority of my church homeschools. There are a couple folks that have Christian schools. That's great. But the vast majority of our folks are homeschoolers. And I'm not a prophet, but it seems really obvious to me that the regime is setting things up to go after homeschooling. That just seems patently obvious. Yeah, it's unavoidable. Their whole worldview demands it. It just demands it. So I find myself struggling, to be perfectly honest with you, to do regular sermons because I see these challenges on the horizon and they're coming fast.